It all began on a cold December morning in 2030, when Ethan woke up sweating after a nightmare. He had dreamt of his wife Lily, saying something that left him deeply unsettled. "They are coming, but they are not what we think." He glanced at the clock and realized he had overslept. In a hurry, he called for his daughter, Emily, who was born with hearing impairment, and helped her put on her hearing aiding. Soon they were outside, where a crowd had already gathered, all staring at a massive screen in the town square. The government was broadcasting live footage of a spacecraft returning to Earth. In recent years, such events had become more common, but this one felt different. Emily, curious as always, asked, "When will the parachutes deploy?" The little girl knew a lot about spacecraft, a hobby her mother, Lily, had always encouraged. Ethan held her arm tightly, trying to hide his nervousness. Inside that spacecraft were Lily and her mission partner, Daniel. The crowd was eerily silent, broken only by the sound of hushed whispers and tense breaths. Suddenly, something seemed wrong. Daniel's voice crackled over the audio. "The parachute system isn't responding." The camera shifted to show Lily, frozen in place, until Daniel shouted at her to activate the manual override. After a few agonizing seconds, Lily pulled the lever, and the parachutes deployed. The spacecraft landed safely, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Ethan received a call from Lily shortly after the landing, but her voice sounded different. "Something very strange happened up there, Ethan," she said. Before she could explain, the call began to break up, and the connection was lost. What secrets had Lily uncovered in space? And why did she sound so afraid? The next day, Ethan and Emily went to the airport to pick up Lily, but they were met with troubling news. The plane carrying Lily and Daniel had disappeared. The astronauts' families, including Ethan and Emily, were taken to a hotel, while the government organized search efforts. Amid the chaos, Ethan noticed an elderly woman waving at Emily and trying to hand him something. He brushed her off, but the woman seemed to know something no one else did. That night, as Ethan put Emily to bed, he tried to keep his composure. He found an old book that Lily used to read to Emily about the Voyager program, which had sent messages of peace and human culture into space decades ago. He explained to Emily how humanity had sent maps, sounds, and languages to whoever might be out there. "But what if someone answered?" Emily asked. Ethan only smiled, trying to reassure her. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. Whatever Lily discovered in space was bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. Ethan began to realize that the key to everything might lie in Emily's hands, and the words Lily had left behind. But could he protect his family before the truth came to light? The plane that never returned. The sun had barely risen when Ethan and Emily woke up in the makeshift hotel room provided by the government. The disappearance of Lily and Daniel's plane dominated the news. How does a plane just disappear in the 21st century? Ethan muttered as he prepared Emily for breakfast. The observant girl asked, "Dad, is Mom lost like Voyager was?" The simple but painful question made Ethan pause. In the hotel's main hall, the astronauts' families gathered, demanding answers. But chaos reigned. Officials tried to calm everyone while avoiding concrete details. Amid the commotion, Ethan saw the elderly woman again, the same one who had waved at Emily at the airport. This time, she approached him. Before he could brush her off again, she placed a small piece of paper in his hand and vanished into the crowd. The paper contained an address and 2 words. She heard. 3 months earlier, during the space mission, Lily had been documenting advancements in her experiment. She and Daniel were testing a revolutionary method for regenerating human cells, a project that promised to extend human life like never before. While aboard the station, Lily heard a faint, repetitive sound coming from the radio. At first it seemed like static, but a single word emerged from the noise. "Hello, Trout." Lily thought it was interference from Earth, but Daniel, analyzing satellite data, concluded otherwise. "The radio is pointed away from Earth. This isn't human," he said. What should have been a straightforward scientific mission now turned into something far more complex. Against Daniel's advice, Lily recorded the coordinates of the signal, writing them on her arm. Back in the present, Ethan started connecting the dots. He looked at the paper given to him by the elderly woman, and decided to investigate the address. Before doing so, he was summoned to a government meeting. Officials announced that pieces of the plane's wreckage had been found in the ocean. There were no survivors. Hearing this, Ethan stood up, refusing to believe it. He insisted that Lily wasn't dead, but Tim Harper, a federal agent, silenced him with a cold tone. "Your wife didn't behave as expected during the mission. There are things you need to tell us, Ethan." The agent's demeanor made Ethan suspicious. He stormed out of the meeting, Emily in tow. As they left the building, they passed a small vigil of flowers and candles for the victims of the crash. But something caught Ethan's eye: a blurry photo of Lily, taken during the mission. Beside it, a note read, "She knew before all of us." Ethan decided to follow the address on the paper. He left Emily with a trusted friend and drove to an isolated neighborhood. Upon arriving, he found an old, seemingly abandoned house. Inside, he discovered the elderly woman sitting by a dusty radio, adjusting its dials. "Are you her husband?" the woman asked without turning around. Ethan nodded, confused. "Your wife heard something she wasn't supposed to. Something that has always been there waiting for us to listen." She turned a knob on the radio, and the familiar hello filled the room. Ethan froze. This can't be real. That's human." The woman shook her head. "It's our message, but it isn't ours. It was sent back, and what sent it back is coming." Ethan now understood that Lily had discovered something in space that challenged everything humanity believed it knew. But he still didn't know how far the government was willing to go to keep the truth hidden, or what they would do to stop him from uncovering it. The voices we were never meant to hear. Ethan left the elderly woman's house with his mind racing. The sound he had heard on the radio seemed human, but the woman's words echoed in his thoughts. "It's our message. But it isn't ours. Who would send it back? And why?" He knew he needed answers, and the only way to get them was to uncover what Lily had known before her mission was cut short. On the drive back, Ethan received a text message from federal agent Tim Harper. "We need to talk. We have evidence that could change everything." The message came with an address for a meeting spot. Despite his doubts, Ethan decided to go. Meanwhile, memories of Lily in orbit took shape. After hearing the sound for the first time, she recorded the coordinates and tried to dismiss what she had heard. But the radio emitted the same hello repeatedly over the following days. The repetition was hypnotic, almost as if it were directed at her. Daniel insisted she focus on the experiment, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. One night, while analyzing data from the transmissions, Lily discovered something chilling. The coordinates of the sound were moving. It was getting closer. Determined, she contacted Ben, the head of the mission on Earth and one of the few people aware of the signal. "Don't tell anyone," he warned. "The mission must continue. Leave the rest to us." But Lily couldn't ignore it. She recorded a message for Ethan and Emily, saying there was something in space they needed to know. "If something happens to me, the coordinates are in my journal." What she didn't know was that her transmission had been intercepted before it could reach Earth. In the present, Ethan arrived at the meeting spot, a remote storage facility where Tim Harper was waiting with a folder full of documents. "You were right," Tim began. "The landing footage was faked. It wasn't live, and there's more." Tim showed Ethan recordings of communications between Lily and Mission Control. In one clip, Lily said, "They're mimicking us. This is their message." But what shocked Ethan most was the final report from Ben, the mission leader. "The contact must be destroyed. We can't take the risk." "They knew," Ethan said, his heart pounding. "They knew something was coming, and they chose to hide it." Before he could process everything, Tim handed him a small piece of metal with alien symbols etched into it. "We found this in the wreckage," Tim said. Ethan immediately recognized it. It matched the sketches Lily had drawn in her journal years ago, before her dreams of space became a reality. Back in space, Lily knew her life was in danger. After confronting Daniel, she realized he also knew more than he was letting on. "They'll never let this reach Earth," he admitted. "This message will destroy us." Desperate, Lily made a bold decision. She entered the communications room and transmitted the coordinates of the signal to a safe location, Emily's radio. She knew the government would try to intercept the message but hoped Ethan would understand what needed to be done. Before she could leave the room, Daniel locked her inside. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said through the intercom, "but I can't let this go any further." That was the last time Lily's voice was heard by Mission Control. The loss of communication with her and Daniel marked the beginning of the plane's mysterious disappearance. Ethan returned home with the alien metal and the documents Tim had given him. Emily was sitting on the floor, tinkering with the radio Ethan had retrieved from the elderly woman's house. "Dad, listen to this," she said, turning it on. The familiar hello filled the room again, but this time, something was different. It was Lily's voice. She said, "Ethan, protect Emily. They can't find the coordinates. It's the only way we'll survive." Ethan froze, listening to his wife's voice as if she were still alive. But how could that be? Lily was gone, wasn't she? Ethan now knew the government was hiding more than just the origin of the message. Something was out there. Something rapidly approaching Earth. With Emily by his side, he needed to uncover what Lily had known and protect the coordinates before it was too late. The code, that wasn't ours. The radio continued to play Lily's voice, but something felt off. Her words were fragmented, as if pieces of different messages had been spliced together. Ethan adjusted the dial, trying to clear up the transmission. Emily, watching closely, said, "Dad, it sounds like she's trying to tell us something, but she can't." As he tried to decipher the message, Ethan realized some of the words sounded familiar. He grabbed Lily's journal, which had been left untouched since her last mission, and began flipping through it. Amidst scientific notes and personal reflections, he found numbers and symbols that matched the alien metal Tim had given him. Emily pointed to a passage in the journal. "Mom drew this." It was a crude diagram of what appeared to be a spacecraft, accompanied by coordinates that matched what Lily had written on her arm during the mission. Ethan began to see that his wife had left a trail of clues, all leading to one specific location, an abandoned NASA facility that had been shut down years earlier due to budget cuts. The encounter that redefined humanity. The rumble of military vehicles outside shook the ground. Inside the abandoned NASA facility, Ethan, Emily, Tim, and the others stood frozen, staring at each other in a tense standoff. The alien metal artifact was now in Tim's hands, and he seemed determined to use it, despite Ben and Daniel's insistence that opening the invitation could bring untold dangers. "You want to know what's out there?" Tim said, looking directly at Ethan. "Your wife knew, and she believed it was worth the sacrifice. Now it's our turn to decide." As Tim activated the control panel in the facility using the alien artifact, Ethan knelt beside Emily, shielding her from what might come next. "Emily, what would your mom do?" he asked. The girl looked at him, her eyes filled with determination, and whispered, "She'd believe in them." The familiar hello sound echoed through the facility, but this time, a series of lights began to pulse across the control panel. A hologram projected into the air, a three-dimensional map of the solar system, with a blinking point orbiting Earth. "It's here," Tim said. "They're already here." Ben tried to intervene, but the sequence had already been triggered. Suddenly, the lights in the facility went out, and an eerie silence filled the room. Outside, the military watched as a brilliant light began to glow in the night sky. It wasn't a conventional spacecraft, it was something beyond human comprehension. A massive translucent structure that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Ethan, Emily, and the others stepped outside to see the object approaching. It emitted no sound and gave no indication of hostility. Only a quiet, unexplainable presence, as if it were waiting. Emily held Ethan's hand tightly and whispered, "Dad, she's here." Tim looked at the structure, his face pale but resolute. "If they were hostile, they would have attacked already," he said. "But still, how do we know we can trust them?" As the others debated, Emily stepped forward, walking toward the glowing light. "Emily, come back!" Ethan shouted, but something inside him told him to let her go. The structure began to glow brighter, and then, to everyone's astonishment, a sound echoed across the desert. "We are here. You sent the first message." The structure opened a portal of light, revealing something no one could have anticipated. Voyager 1, the ancient spacecraft, launched by humanity in the 20th century, had returned. But it was different now. Its exterior covered in an unfamiliar iridescent material, with markings that suggested it had been repaired or enhanced. Emily reached out to touch the spacecraft. But before she could, a new projection appeared in the sky. It was a series of images. Humans laughing, children playing, forests, oceans. They were the same images Voyager 1 had carried into space decades ago, now being shown back to Earth. And then came the final message: "We returned it. Are you ready?" Ethan realized that this was the decision Lily had always spoken of. Humanity now had the chance to learn, grow, and perhaps connect with something far greater. But it would come at a cost. Ben, Daniel, and Tim began arguing again. But Ethan silenced them. "My wife believed that the truth would unite us. If we try to destroy this, we're rejecting everything that makes us human." He turned to Tim. "You've seen what they can do. Do you really think we can fight them? Or do you think we can learn from them?" Reluctantly, Tim handed the alien artifact to Ethan. "Do what you have to do." Ethan looked at Emily and said, "This is what your mom would have wanted." He activated the artifact, and the portal of light began to expand. The structure emitted a sound like a chorus, and then, to everyone's amazement, a translucent being emerged. It wasn't human, but its form was almost familiar, as if it had been designed not to frighten. "Thank you for sending your message," Ethan said, tears in his eyes. In the weeks that followed, humanity began to change. The return of Voyager 1 didn't just bring advanced technology. It brought hope. World leaders began working together to decode the visitors' messages, while scientists explored the gifts they had left behind. New sources of energy, groundbreaking medical advancements, and innovations in communication began to emerge. But not everyone was ready for the truth. Conspiracy theories and protests erupted worldwide, with some claiming that humanity shouldn't trust the visitors. Others sought to weaponize the technology for their own gain, challenging the peaceful purpose of the encounter. At the heart of it all, however, was a new sense of possibility. For the first time, humanity could look to the stars not as a fragmented collection of nations, but as a species united by curiosity and purpose. In a secure laboratory, a team of scientists worked tirelessly to analyze the data left by Voyager 1. Among them was Ben, now seeking redemption for his actions. As he reviewed the spacecraft's recordings, he found something extraordinary. The original Voyager 1 recordings had been altered. A sequence of images depicted Earth in ways that had never been captured before, as if seen through the eyes of another species. And at the very end of the images, a familiar voice played. Lily's voice. "If you're hearing this, it means they believed in us. Don't waste this chance. Everything we need is within us." Ben closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. He realized that Lily's legacy wasn't just a message for the visitors. It was a message for humanity itself. The power to change was always within us. On St. Nicholas Day, exactly 1 year after the first contact, Ethan and Emily sat together under the stars. Emily pointed to a bright light in the sky. "Dad, look at that. It's moving." Ethan recognized it instantly. It wasn't a star or a satellite. It was the structure they had seen in the desert, now glowing like a beacon. He wondered what it meant, but Emily, with her childlike wisdom, answered for him. "They're just reminding us they're still there." And then, for the first time in months, the old radio in the corner of the room emitted a faint sound. Ethan turned it on, and Lily's voice echoed one last time. "You were always ready. Now, just believe." Ethan and Emily smiled, knowing that the future wasn't a fixed path but a journey they, and all of humanity, were still writing. The world didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, it had something far more important: a shared purpose to keep searching.